Hello there, we are back, and we're back with our next session, how the online world is forcing the classroom to evolve. So this is going to be a little bit of an interesting change from maybe what we've had thus far today. So without further ado, I am going to shut up and get the heck out of the way. So I'm over to you.
Cool, thanks. So I'm Som, 20 years old, computer science major at UT Austin. And really the reason I'm here is just because I think I have something interesting to say and I want to say it. But with that, I've done some research, but I'm not an expert or anything. So if you disagree with anything, you should challenge me in the comments. I just think it'd be cool if, something resonates with someone and the idea kind of lives on afterwards. But yeah, so it's cool if you guys challenge me, and I'm just gonna get into it. So there's three things I want to talk about. One, why students need to be prepared for an online world. Two, what we've already done to try to prepare students for an online world. And three, what I think we should ultimately do to prepare students for an online world. All right, first of all, does anyone think that they have to Google a lot for their job? Or does anybody have any stories of them learning a lot through Googling that they've applied at their job? And I'll go first. So as kind of a software engineer or someone who just builds things, a lot of times I'll have like a high level understanding of what I want to do, but I'm not going to have it planned out in terms of code. And then I'm going to have to actually Google as I go step by step the actual code that I write out. So the vast majority of what I write out is a direct result of Googling. And if you have any software engineer friends, you would also know, you probably hear about that meme that all they do is Google. So no one has stories, I guess I'll just keep going. If you do have experience, though, Googling for your job, you'd be representing a trend called microlearning. Oh, I got a comment. There's someone here. Okay, cool. Yeah. I mean, it's not that surprising because, a lot of modern day knowledge workers, they need to always be on like the forefront of their industry, which I think you guys get because y'all are here. Y'all are trying to learn. So anyways, you guys all represent a trend called microlearning. There's three aspects of it. And really, it just boils down to learning specific information when you need it and in context. So just like on a case-by-case basis. So yeah, it's obviously a really important skill for software engineers, but I've noticed a lot of my peers aren't good at it because they're used to macro learning. They're used to learning in a classroom with a textbook, and they don't really have the confidence to just start a project and just Google as you go, which is really important in my experience. So considering how important it is to microlearn, which is a relatively new phenomenon, by the way, because it's been made possible with the internet. Resources like YouTube or blogs or Stack Overflow, you have a lot more information on demand when you need it. And so because of that, we should be preparing students to learn in a different way, because in a more real world way. If you've heard of web quests, they were designed in 1995. They're these web-based assignments, and they were made at a time when 14% of Americans had the internet, 21% had a vague understanding of it, and 42% had never heard of it. And another note I want to make is that they're typically standalone assignments, and I'll get back to that note later. But the main point I want to make right now is that web quests are pretty old. So it's kind of weird that I was still using them in like the 2010s. Because when the web quest first originated, the main goal was, hey, we should like introduce students to this really novel new technology that they might not have experience with. Not to say that the internet isn't still as important today as it was then, which I think it's even more important as I'm arguing, but that web quests, or like how we think about web-based assignments, should evolve. Because the problem now isn't that I can't make basic Google searches, I can't use the internet. The problem is that I don't really know how to get specialized knowledge in a discipline. So it's harder for me, or for most people, to sift through all the content, all the SEO laden content out there, all those top 10 listicles that BuzzFeed keeps putting out, and find information that's really relevant to me and what I'm looking for, and that's high quality. And so ultimately, here's what I think we should do to prepare students, and how I think we should evolve the web quest. Because I think we should prepare students in a real world way. So I think most of schooling can remain the same, because microlearning generally builds off an existing knowledge base anyways. But I think web-based assignments should be more purposeful. Right now, as I said, web quests are generally standalone assignments, but I think web quests should be an opportunity to explore a specific part that's been covered in class more in depth. For example, if you're learning about like the mitochondria of the cell in biology, why not talk about a recent development, or how apply it to the real world, and look at blogs and try to apply and make connections in novel ways. And 3 kind of goes along with 2, is about focusing on narrow topics rather than big, broad topics, which is what my experience has been so far. And I think ultimately that's going to allow students to be more comfortable kind of just making those connections on their own, so that they don't need a comprehensive textbook or 1-hour lecture. They can learn the very niche stuff and then connect it to overall form a larger, more comprehensive knowledge base. Here's a graphic I made, kind of about my experience with working out. I started off with a book, but ultimately, like, anytime I have a question, if I have like my elbows hurting, it's been like a couple days, I Google it. If I have a new workout I want to try out, or a new exercise I want to do, I can Google it on the fly and learn as I go. I wasted my first year working out. I don't know if any of you guys work out and you have that experience with wasting like your first year, because I think that's a pretty common experience. But that was my experience, and it took a while for me to really learn a lot. With that, I mean, no one challenged me. I think you should challenge me, though, because I appreciate negative feedback. I really respond to getting better. If anyone wants to say anything, I'll open it up to discussion. Yeah, okay. See, Thomas, or Tom, it's a pretty common issue. I really don't have. I was kind of expecting more of a discussion on some of the. I was thinking maybe we could go more in depth to examples, because it's a pretty broad concept. But yeah.
So, just to jump in, I mean, I think there's an interesting challenge here, and I suppose it exists in different ways, whether you look at kind of an academic setting or in the workplace, for instance, where there is, for example, a concern in the workplace that if people are sourcing their own information, be it actual Google or some form of internal Google in a knowledge base, how do we ensure they're getting good information? How do we ensure that our people are kind of information savvy enough to figure out what's a good and what's a not so great source?
Mhm.
So, I mean, have you got any thoughts on that at all?
Okay, I'm sorry. I got kind of distracted from Pete's
That's all
comment.
right.
Um, wait, can you just reiterate what you said? Or
Yeah, so I mean, I think there's always a concern in certainly more in business settings. I think when people are sourcing their own information from a Google search or a knowledge base search. So
Mhm.
how do we ensure that people are sourcing good information? How do we make them information savvy enough to do that?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's about practice. I think that's why you would try to practice in school, because I think you have to build intuition. I don't think it's one of those things that you can just like give people actionable steps and they can just follow that through. Um, that's why I think. Should I move on to the comments?
Yeah. Let's have a little look. Oh, I think you'd already seen Peter's, but I think we've got a couple from Catherine here. She's been very active across the last few days. So essentially, googling on the fly is active reading, isn't it? You have the thought, and then you explore it further. Getting distracted by Google or Bing or Chat GPT is another matter. And she loves finding a good rabbit hole to dive down. So that's an interesting thing. There, how do we prevent that being the case?
How do we prevent going down like a rabbit hole?
Yeah, because there are deliberately distractors. Google wants you to click on whatever it chooses to serve you for X amount of money.
Yeah, yeah. I guess that kind of goes along with like the SEO thing. There's a lot of just random content that's clickbaity. Um, yeah, again, I don't really have like a great solution because honestly, like a lot of my my Google searches just end with like Reddit at the end, and I'll find someone with like a very niche solution. But
Mm.
I do think like it does like it is a skill that needs to be trained. Like there is a lot of value in being able to Google.
It's interesting because it's even internally. So I know I've delivered training in organizations before, where it's like, and here's how to use the search function in our internal knowledge base.
Hmm.
Here's how to think about boolean search, or here's how to think about how you can't search for exactly what you want but think about adjacent processes and topics that might lead you to it,
Hmm.
which I think is a whole area of training that we sometimes do internally but could definitely be maybe part of the education system moving forwards.
Hmm.
um, so there's Peter said, I think the push whilst I was teaching high school was teaching students to find accurate and legitimate sources. So differentiating, as I was saying, bad information is important. I think Maureen's there gone information literacy. And I think that's a really interesting topic. It's not sure what your take on it is, Son, but I find it's broadly a bit lacking,
Hmm.
um, and that people often struggle to read something and I'd be able to go, that is credible or that is not credible.
Hmm. Yeah, I think what Pete's saying is interesting also because like
Hmm.
I was a student in high school not that long ago, and my teacher did tell me. I mean, it is we went through all kinds of like ways to tell if a source is credible. At the same time, though, I heard that like MLA has gotten so much more expansive in what like they allow. Like you can like literally cite a tweet, right? So with that, there's all kinds of different ways to differentiate what because a tweet could be a good source if it's from like an author or something like that.
Hmm.
Or I think I also find like the idea kind of at odds with like the micro learning because you shouldn't necessarily just find someone very credible and then like get a very quick synopsis on something. You need to be like usually I find like very specialized topics to be built around like blog posts and stuff like that rather than like Khan Academy.
I think that, yeah, I think this is kind of the challenge, isn't it? That a lot of the newer, certainly a lot of the tech world, especially, there aren't massive established kind of credible sources. Whereas a prime example being, for instance, if you're learning to become an instructional designer, let's say, and you're looking into learning theory, there are established credible sources of information.
Hmm.
You don't want to take, Jim's blog on cognitive load as, gospel. What you want to do is go and have a look at the research that generated the theory. So I guess it just changes based on the industry that you're in. We've got loads of comments coming through here. So Catherine, switch off the random feeds on search engines. Being curious when on topic is productive. When I was teaching in further education 12 years ago, we used to advise students not to use Wikipedia. Now it's often a starting point, not the end point, but somewhere to start the search from, jumping off to evaluate accuracy. That's really interesting.
Yeah, I've definitely noticed the switch. I mean, even from like middle school to high school, like I was in classes when that switch happened. But I don't actually use Wikipedia in my real life. Like I don't take the that kind of approach. I don't know, Tom. Do you usually find sources that way?
Yeah, I mean, I certainly do. But again, it depends on the sort of information I'm looking for. So interesting, we had a session earlier today where we found ourselves looking at a JSON file for the adapt authoring tool. Now, if I wanted to figure out what that was, I would almost certainly head to the adapt forum. It's an
Mm-hmm.
incredibly niche topic. It's incredibly specific. I would go to that one place.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but prime example being another session we had on the 12 principles of multimedia learning from Richard Mayer. I would almost certainly be happy to go and start a search about Richard Mayer's research on something like Wikipedia, and then using their references go off to find original texts or books and things like that. But I think it's really topic dependent, I would say.
Mm-hmm.
Let's have a look. Mandy coming in with soft skills like critical thinking, problem solving must become hard skills or core skills. And I think that's kind of what to an extent, what you're getting at with your presentation, wasn't it? The fact that these are maybe not being embedded as much as they should.
Yeah, basically, they just need to be have a more active presence. I feel like because I think even now we're kind of talking about like looking for sources and looking for content in a very like standalone way, rather than like I don't know, microlearning is just so much more niche than any because I honestly I tried to come up with examples to include in my presentation, but I wasn't sure because it is just so like case by case. I wasn't even sure what a good question necessarily would entail, but I do find that I've gotten better at Googling now than I was 3 years ago. So,
And there's definitely a practice element to it, and kind of we have the concept of spaced repetition. And that kind of leans exactly into this. If we're going to teach people how to be sort of applying critical thinking or problem solving, it's not going to be a 6 weeks in a classroom and now you've got it, go forth and do. It's going to be these smaller bite-sized tasks that we go back to time and time again. And when we design microlearning as a prime example, unfortunately microlearning in the L&D field gets attached to anything that is short, as opposed to actually being one incredibly specific topic with just what you need and all these other things that we're talking about. Peter's kind of, this is a bit of an L&D specific joke, I suppose, but the idea that any information literacy is overtaken by the power of a pyramid in our world. If you put it in a pyramid or a quadrant, we like quadrants as well, and occasionally a Venn diagram, everyone will believe you. Here we go. James, in a school setting, of course, the teacher should look at the sources the students are selecting and be providing feedback. In a work setting, though, someone with a similar supervisory role to provide feedback on learning is useful, or a peer feedback setup. That's a really interesting thought. So in the workplace, are there is there an opportunity to engage in some social learning? Share the resources that you found, and then have others within the business who work with you go, oh, that's a good source or that's a bad source, and upvote and downvote, a bit like an internal Reddit, I suppose. That's that would be quite
yeah,
cool.
that does sound interesting. Being able to share more resources.
Yeah, kind of like an employee curated knowledge base.
Hmm.
That would be really nice. A great example of how you could use this. Catherine, oh, we've got just flooding in the comments now. In a face-to-face situation with a tutor, the tutor may use Socratic questioning with a group to drive a conversation, explore deeper into a topic. I often think that my own Googling is a form of Socratic questioning. That's not something I'd ever thought about, but I suppose it kind of is, isn't it?
I think that was really accurate. That's how I generally go down and like really dig deep into a topic.
Oh, I like it. That's really cool. Um, here's an interesting one. So, if you don't know anything at all about a topic, then you might start with Wiki and go digging for references from there. Yeah, I think
Hmm.
that's a good starting point. Da, da, da. Here we are. We've got a Chat GPT topic. Good. Uh,
I would agree
Great
with
point,
this.
Catherine. Yeah, seeing similar phenomenon with ChatGPT, comparable AI resources right now. I imagine in 10 years it will be just fine as a minimum starting point for students. Yeah, I mean, I think you can tell it's in its infancy right now, but
Hmm.
I mean the Bing integration when ChatGPT was integrated into Bing, there were some problems.
Hmm.
But on the whole, incredible potential.
Yeah,
Um,
I mean, as a computer science major, I mean, well, I've used it a lot, just experimenting, and I have a lot of friends who've used it a lot. Like it gives me wrong answers a lot for like anything that requires application, but it's also like faster than Google because I just stay on one page. I don't have to go through 5 different pages and scroll down to one specific paragraph. So again, like the starting point aspect is, I think, really accurate.
Absolutely. Um, let's see what else we've got in here. We've got time for maybe a few more points before we run out of time. But tools like ChatGPT are being written into some assignments, which is great because I know initially there was a bit of a rush to try and ban it, which was unfortunate. The AI is being explicitly referenced as a research partner or tool, and then the assignment goes to apply this. AI definitely needs checking and evaluating because you can catch it waffling sometimes. Yeah, I would say confidently wrong, I think
Hmm.
is the nice way of putting it sometimes, isn't
Yeah,
it?
I mean that's
Um,
interesting. I guess like part of the assignment would then entail having to fact check the AI. Um,
which in
I
some
mean,
ways, from a learning perspective, that's quite an exciting potential because it's very easy when you're told something from a seemingly authoritative
hmm,
place to just accept it. So
hmm.
maybe that will be a way that we do see increased information literacy, is people
Yeah,
having to check what they're told more.
having to practice critical thinking when something seems wrong.
Yeah, this is it. That's exciting stuff.
Hmm.
And then, Deborah, in my experience, frameworks for different educational development that step through related material connecting learning to beneficial structures has been more prolific, responding to the prior lack of resources. Yeah, I think that's probably a fairly shared experience. Um, Great. The last one. Google doesn't complain that you're asking too many questions. Yes, yeah. That's again, it's things like that where you can tell that these technologies are new, right? I think it was a bit sad to see so many people excited to go, oh, ChatGPT gave me this silly answer to what is 1 plus 1 or whatever. It's kind of like that's not really what it's for. Um, I kind of feel like what you're talking about here, Som, that's where this technology is going to really come into its own.
Hmm. You mean like ChatGPT?
Yeah,
Hmm. Yeah. Although to be honest, if ChatGPT doesn't know, I guess that's also probably like the biggest risk factor too. Because if it doesn't know, it won't tell you that it doesn't know.
yes, yeah. I think there would be. Oh, I mean, as it is, I think it's because it's trained on a fairly limited knowledge base, wasn't it? Actual Chat GPT from like 2021 or whatever it was.
Hmm.
Um, so it's fairly limited now. But I'd say once it's got more access to everything and they've ironed out maybe some of the initial kinks, hopefully it'll be less wrong most of the time.
Mm, maybe. Yeah. I mean,
Who
you never know
knows?
what's gonna happen the next couple of years.
this is it. I kind of think if you went back a year ago and said, "Oh yeah, this AI is going to come out and do this, that, and that," everyone would have gone, "Nah, it's not there yet," and it blew everyone away, didn't it? So I think it's yeah, exciting stuff.
Yeah.
Brilliant. Well, look, I think there's it's such an interesting topic and such a different kind of perspective, maybe, than what we're used to thinking about in terms of micro learning. As I say, micro learning very often we all think about the same sort of things. We think about tools, we think about length of time. I thought this was a really interesting take on what it can be and how early in the education system we ought to be looking at it. So thank you for sort of coming along and sharing that with us today. If people want to get in touch, where's the best place to get in touch with you?
I mean, I'm on LinkedIn. You can also find me on Twitter at Eduardo. Yeah, probably LinkedIn is the best. Som Gupta.
Brilliant. Well, thank you so much for presenting. Thank you to everyone in the audience who has engaged and jumped into the chat, which has been fantastic and really interesting to be involved in. Our next session is at hour. On the main stage here, we have a few things L&D should steal from marketing with Mike Taylor. And on the Zoho stage, we will have tips and tricks, because I can use words, for developing world-class videos with Matt Sestacia. So thank you all very much, and we shall see you again very soon.